What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and today I wanted to talk about playtests. We've got a lot of playtesting going on, and we're probably going to have a lot more in the near future. And by this, I guess I should preface, I mean TTRPG playtesting, right? We are in the world of the Unearthed Arcanas have always been a playtest for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. We have the Tales from the of the Valiant drops once a month with their different design playtest packets. I don't think Critical Role is going to be doing them for Daggerheart, but they might, who knows, right? And potentially, as more friends or other creators in this space make more games, more playtesting will happen. And I've seen a lot of feedback and comments I guess the stuff that I've covered more recently is, again, the Kobold Press and the Dungeons & Dragons 2024 rules revision that's coming out in the Unearthed Arcana. And it made me think, what do you want to see in a playtest? Now, the thing is, what you, as the potential consumer of that playtest packet, want to see may drastically disalign with what the company creating it has. And I think this is something that gets lost in the sauce on a lot of these. And maybe I'm part of the problem. Content creators like me who review this stuff, and sometimes we get a little excited about one thing or another, whether it's super broken and we can't wait to see it in play, or it's like, why would you change this horrible idea? Everyone's gonna hate this. I don't know. But the concept, ultimately, I think we can all agree that the concept of playtesting is that you want to test out some stuff before you make a final product. So, how do you go about this? Do you do minor tweaks and revisions and like, hey, here's a thing I've been working on for a while. It kind of uses some of this stuff and like, just give me the final feedback? Or do you go real broad spectrum, broad strokes and throw a bunch of crap at the wall and see what sticks? And I feel like we've seen a little bit of both from Wizards of the Coast lately, and a little more on the reserved side on the Kobold Press side. So, for instance, I would say that the Bard, the Rogue, the Cleric, those subclasses that we received in the Unearthed Arcana for Wizards of the Coast were relatively close to what we received in the 2014 Player's Handbook. There's differences, sure. Some that made some people upset, but they were mostly similar enough that, with a little bits of realigning here and there, for the most part, they were the same. And they also seem to be the ones that people had the least issue with. Now, a lot of this may be coming from Wizards of the Coast looking at this and saying, well, we've had almost 10 years of game time in our current version. What do we see as gaps and spots we need to improve on? And those being ones that people genuinely seem to enjoy a lot as they were written, so they kind of left them alone. But then you go and look at the Druid for the recent playtest, and it is very, very different from what we had seen in the 2014 Player's Handbook. But I think that's by design. We heard from the start, because they started off with that rule that everybody lost their mind over, you can't crit. Or monsters couldn't crit, rather, in the playtest. One of the original playtests, it said, only players are allowed to get critical hits when they roll a natural 20, and you couldn't crit on magic usage anymore either. And that, obviously, went over like a lead balloon. But Wizards of the Coast said, we want to try it, right? And that was their whole thought process. We want to try it, see what people think. And ultimately, yeah, we'll probably end up changing it and reverting back to the way things were. But if we try this kind of shot in the dark idea and everybody loves it, then we might have found something cool and unique that we can choose to use going forward. And that's where I always try to keep in the back of my mind when I'm doing these videos or reading through these playtests, that it is a playtest. In theory, it could get thrown out entirely. And we've seen that with certain Unearthed Arcanas that never made it into final production. But I'm not a huge fan of the changes of the Druid. I'm not a huge fan to the more recent changes to the Warlock either. But was that intentional, right? They're going to throw something out there and say, like, hey, let's go really far away from what we had done and see what people think about it. If everybody loves it, move forward, print it. But if everyone has very strong opinions about why they like or don't like it, and say mostly it comes into that favor of we don't like it, that gives you the opportunity to say, okay, that was too far. Let's ratchet it back and try to land somewhere either closer to where we were in 2014 or go in some other crazy direction. And I think that ultimately is probably the best bet, I think, is to kind of shake things up where you want to shake it up and maybe go pretty crazy on your option, a little like way out of the spectrum of what people thought you would have done. And then you can slowly, incrementally walk it back to where you want it to be. And I mean, that's a negotiation tactic that people do, right? You go in way higher than you actually want to get the thing for, so that hopefully when you come and meet out, you get to what you actually want. So they went real extreme on the wild shape, and then ultimately they're going to walk it back probably to somewhere in the middle. Same thing with this warlock, where they're like, they're just a half caster now, and they can take some invocations, wasting invocation slots to get themselves access to higher level magic. Maybe that's too far this direction, and we need to kind of walk it back to end up somewhere in the middle that will appease the most people, right? The other thing is you're never going to appeal and appease everyone with what you create. Some people are going to have issues with it, but you have to try to get the large majority. And then ultimately you, as the player or dungeon master, could choose to just ignore it and not even use it if you don't want to. But that's why I also wanted to bring up, we're seeing all the stuff coming from Cobalt Press as well, from Tales of the Valiant. And it's relatively safe, I guess I'd say. They're keeping, the goal is to keep things, to update it, but keep it compatible with 5th edition. And most of the stuff, granted, we've only seen 3 packets, so I can't dissect this too much, right? But to me, there are some instances of where things have shifted and additions of certain things, but it feels very safe and very close to what 5e is. And that's been reflected a lot in the comments, but that makes me question the playtest, right? Do you want it to just be slight tweaks and adjustments to what you already have, so you feel like you're not going too far out of your comfort zone? Or should you have real wide sweeping changes to go somewhere hard, a different direction, and then kind of hopefully get feedback on you don't love this when we go too far this way, and you don't love it when we go too far this way, but if we meet somewhere in the middle, we'll appease the most people. On the other side of it is, unfortunately, you could infinitely playtest something before you ever have to make the chance to pull the trigger to release it. So you also have to consider how long of a lead time do both of these companies have before they're set to print this. We know that, I believe, Cobalt Press is looking to launch a Kickstarter in the next couple of months here. And we know that Wizards of the Coast is looking to fully roll out the 2024 rules revisions in 2024. If you want to go far on the different sides of where these subclasses or different abilities are going to land, do you have enough time to go that drastic one way or another to say, like, hey, we did it, we were able to get the enough feedback on what we wanted to, so we can incorporate it however we need to get ourselves somewhere in the middle that appeals to the most people? I don't really know what the answer is, but I'm curious what your thoughts and opinions are on this. What do you think should be, if you were in control, or you were the data analysis person or what have you, from either Wizards of the Coast, Tales of the Valiant, or some new RPG that's on the horizon, or something that you're looking to make up and you're wondering yourself, how would you go about playtesting? Would you stay safe and just do minor tweaks to your already established product? Or would you take this as the opportunity to swing for the fences and go real broad spectrum, wide sweeping changes, possibly changing up the entire mechanic that you've been comfortable with for like 8 years, like we saw with the Druid, and say like, hey, we're going to give this a shot. If everybody loves it, awesome, we did good. But if they don't, why didn't they like it? And that's the other part, right? Almost in some instances, the negative feedback of why people don't like something is almost just as useful, if not possibly more so, than the positive feedback of why they do like it. You could say, okay, they didn't like the changes to Wild Shape because they felt like it didn't really matter what form you were in. There was nothing unique to those different forms, being a snake versus a bear or what have you. Whereas if we were to change it to be more like 2014, we can have a little more uniqueness and special abilities, maybe an extra health pool so that you're more survivable, what have you, right? Which way do you go? So I'm very curious what the general consensus on this is. Do we go more conservative and stay close to what we already established, or more, open-minded and try to crazy new ideas to see if something uh, really sticks out? And like I said, maybe you get a winner that way, right? You go, who knows, right? Maybe everybody, like, if this doesn't seem to be generally what happened, but if everybody loved the new changes to the warlock or the new changes to the druid, then you come out as looking like a visionary with this great new concept. So I don't know. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below, and I'll see you all next time.